Welcome, everybody. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Ariel Gold, and I'm the Executive Director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation US chapter. And for anybody, we have a lot of folks on this Zoom already today. For anybody who's not familiar with the Fellowship of Reconciliation, we are the oldest interfaith peace and justice organization in the US. And we do these monthly conversations with faith leaders and peace and justice activists, educators, people we want to highlight and learn about their work and how they came to be who they are, and to inspire us and give us that spunk to keep going, to keep working hard to create a better world, a world without hatred and racism, without war and violence. We're going to be doing this month's Gathering Voices just a little bit differently. Usually I am the only host and I lead the conversation, but this month, I'm really excited to have my colleague, I call him my right arm as well, Bill McGarvey, who's an award-winning media professional. If anyone who followed the campaign we led to have faith leaders call for a Christmas truce in Ukraine, Bill was instrumental in making that happen and worked around the clock to see that happened and to get it noticed in places like Religious News Service and the Washington Post. He directed and produced a 30-minute documentary called Occupy at 10, and I encourage you to go to FOR's website. Someone can put that in the chat, the link to that. I encourage you to check it out. He's also a best-selling author and, as you can see, a musician, though he has not yet entertained me with music. But Bill has become really close with Zohara, and while I've been moving actually, and I haven't gotten a chance yet to read Zohara's book, Bill has, and has been telling me about it frequently. So he's going to lead this conversation, and I'm going to help back him up and take questions for him and Zohara. And with that, I give you Bill McGarvey.
Thanks a lot, Ariel. Thank you for that nice introduction. Those of you who followed the Christmas truce, we appreciate all that support out there. Unfortunately, it didn't work, so we have to go get back to brass tacks and start working again. But it was a wonderful experience, and it was a really beautiful moment for FOR and other folks, other groups, Code Pink, the National Council of Elders, to get together. So thank you so much for that. And to be honest, Zohara Simmons, who is our guest today, and who's a friend of mine, it was actually instrumental in us getting that moving as well with the National Council of Elders and her many, many groups that she works with and individuals she works with. She's got enormous contacts down through her life. And that's really why I thought it would be great for us. And I mentioned this to Ariel a couple months ago when Zohara mentioned there was a book being done. The book is called Stayed on Freedom. Hopefully you can see that. It's available everywhere. The Long History of Black Power Through One Family's Journey. It's by a professor named Dan Berger, who was actually a former student of Zohara's at the University of Florida. Zohara taught for 20 years, a tenured faculty member at the University of Florida in the religion department. But that's just one tiny part of this enormous journey she went on with Michael Simmons, who is her now ex-husband. They've been separated for many, many years, divorced for many years, and their daughter Aisha, who's also a documentary filmmaker of some renown and is getting tons of fellowships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All throughout the through line through their lives has been this struggle, resistance, and the struggle for Black power. And I'll just give you a little bit of the history there before I introduce Zohara and bring her on and ask her to read a little bit from her book. So Zohara was born Gwendolyn Robinson. I'm trying to share a screen here if I can. Sorry about that. Is there a shared screen?
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay.
I will.
No, that's I have to share it. It's not a big deal. Oh, here you go. Share screen. So I was going to show you some pictures here. Zohara was born Gwendolyn Robinson in Memphis, Tennessee. She can talk a little bit about that. And she was raised essentially by this lovely woman we see here, Rhoda, who was her grandmother. And she was raised almost exclusively by a grandmother until her teenage years. Her grandmother was also, Rhoda was raised herself by her own grandmother, who was an enslaved person. So Zohara's trip takes her through in the early 60s, getting a full scholarship to Spelman College. And she will tell you more about this. But of course, back then the idea was that young Black men and women go to these incredible historically Black colleges and universities to become upwardly mobile members of society, et cetera. And fascinatingly, that she gets, the book details in great detail about how when she gets to Spelman, the head of Spelman basically says, and the administration very, very sincerely says, your daughter at Spelman should not be involved in any of these activist things. We like Martin Luther King Jr., but that's not for us. We're not getting involved in the movement at all. So about 2 years in, along with the help of the people she's meeting along the way, through Mennonite House, which is Vincent Harding, also through Howard Zinn, who was very famously a professor who got let go from Spelman. She was influenced by the movement and eventually joined SNCC, which very powerfully, and she did a freedom summer in Mississippi, and her grandmother, and ultimately lost her scholarship to Spelman, and her grandmother told her she essentially wouldn't speak to her anymore. So her journey from then goes through SNCC, and then the Black Power movement from the Atlanta Project, marrying Michael and moving to Philadelphia eventually, and joining the Nation of Islam for a while. Didn't really fit too well in there, and I hope she talks a little about that because of her feminist bent and her feminist sort of commitments. So did not fit too well into that, and eventually found her way into a branch of Sufi Islam, where they're given the name Zohara, and that was mostly in Philadelphia. So this is her with her daughter Aisha, was born in the late 60s, and then on to Zohara with Bawa, who was their guru in the Sufi Islam. And then many, many moons after she had left Spelman, eventually got her PhD from Temple University in religion. If I'm wrong on this, please let me know. And this is a more current contemporary picture of Zohara, Michael Simmons, and their daughter at some event. So I just wanted to give people a little visual as they get to know Zohara here. And Zohara, I think, has got a little bit prepared from her book, which is really essentially by Dan Berger, who's from countless hours of interviews with Zohara, Michael, and Aisha. So Zohara, please welcome to our Gathering Voices today. It's so good to be with you. And if you'd like, could you please maybe read a little bit from your book, say hello? I know you're never at a loss for saying hello and greeting people. You're very welcoming individual.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Ariel and Bill and Ethan, who's operating some controls back there somewhere. My new colleagues, who I love so much and am so thrilled to still be in this struggle and meeting new friends who are committed to struggle as I am. And I must say that I scrolled through some of the photos and I see that I have SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee colleagues on. I have the American Friends Service Committee colleagues. I worked there for 23 years. And I have friends here from Gainesville, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, where I am a member, and possibly others whom I didn't see. My daughter is on, as is Michael. And so I just had to give them my fondest, loving greetings. Bill asked me to read something from the book, and you've heard that I went to Laurel, Mississippi to be a part of the Mississippi Freedom Summer Project, which was in 1964. And Laurel was a town that had a huge Ku Klux Klan involvement there, and the people had been under threat as they were all over the state of Mississippi and in other places in the South where they could not register to vote, certainly, could not run for office. And, it was an apartheid situation. And so this is why SNCC decided to have a project that would bring in up to 1,000 volunteers to crack open the state, as we said, to show to the world what was going on in the state of Mississippi. And Laurel was where I was assigned to be the Freedom School coordinator. 3 days or so after we actually got into Laurel and got set up, the person who was assigned to be the project director disappeared. Now you have to remember that we had already had Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney disappear. And everyone in the movement knew that they were dead, even though, the people were claiming that they probably were down in Mexico having fun. I mean, they actually told those kinds of lies to the news reporters. So needless to say, when someone disappeared, you immediately thought the worst. And of course, calling the Atlanta office, calling the Jackson office, and they in turn calling the Justice Department, the FBI, you name it. Well, as it turned out, he had and
We're having a little bit of technical difficulty.
Are you still there? Maybe a little bit of a floating Wi-Fi situation.
Anyway, as I was saying, in Laurel, when Lester McKinney had to leave, then I became the project director. And of course, I was terrified and I knew nothing about being a project director, but somehow the 23 volunteers, along with myself, we were able to mount a very successful Freedom Summer project there in Laurel and in Jones County, beyond the city itself. And so this is a little segment from me talking about being in Laurel and the work that we were doing. Let me just say that the work included freedom schools, creating freedom schools. We had 2 that operated the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, organizing a chapter of it, and certainly trying to get people registered to vote. But we knew that that was not going to happen. So we had what was called MOCK, M-O-C-K, voter registration that took place in churches, in barbershops, beauty shops, anywhere we could set up. And so we were able to register the people ourselves, which was a part of a strategy to take all of these thousands of people we registered ourselves to the Democratic Party convention held in Atlantic City that August, to show that the people in Mississippi, if given a chance, would register to vote. So this is a little segment from page 74. Through dependability as much as courage, the Laurel Project earned the support of the community. The personal relationships Gwen and other project staff built made SNCC's politics real. When a child fell out of a tree or a resident's wood stove caught fire in a poorly ventilated house, it was to the Laurel Project office that people ran. The town's fire trucks wouldn't be found on the Black side of town. So Gwen and other Freedom Summer volunteers filled buckets full of water to douse the flames. Gwen felt this to be a spiritual success as well as a practical one. The freedom fight taught everyone, SNCC worker and Mississippi resident alike, to reach beyond materialistic values. Of the movement's relationship to the locals, Gwen told a reporter, quote, "We want to learn with them new values. This is a struggle for me to get away from this materialism. And while I'm struggling, I help them struggle." Not everyone in SNCC had such transcendent aims, she acknowledged, but the movement was giving her a glimpse of heaven on earth, of a future without racism. "This is religion to me," she said. End of quote.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Zohara.
Oh,
That's great.
beautiful.
I love you. We talked earlier this week about this, and I remember you said to me, I'd love you to give a little context around joining SNCC. That was when you wrote that, when you said that quote, it was 1964, 65?
Yes, 64.
So can you give us a little context? I mean, you said to me, says, you wanted to let people know that when you see the, 75 years later, you see the end of or you see the story now, you think, oh, it was all fine, but how difficult it was. What was the context of your family and getting involved in SNCC and all that? You said it was not easy. Can you talk a little about that struggle?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's important for people to know that I came from a working class family. I was the first person in the immediate family to go to college. And my grandmother, who had finished the 6th grade, drummed into me since I can remember that I was going to college and that I was going to get an education. And so this was the trajectory that I had been set upon, and I wanted it, and of course, my first college choice was Spelman College. It was the college that my minister's wife had graduated from. It was the college that my doctor's 2 daughters had graduated from, one of them being at Meharry Medical School when I left to go to Spelman, and the other one being an opera singer in Paris. So I knew that Spelman was the place that I needed to go because it produced results. And so, of course, my grandmother, my church, everybody on my street, my school, they were elated and wished me well. And so when I got to Spelman, of course, the civil rights movement, the student movement was raging. And there were many students, not so many from Spelman at that point, but from Morehouse and Clark, Atlanta. Well, it was just Clark University, the Atlanta University, and the other schools. They had a movement going. And so they were always on campus attempting to recruit us. And as Bill noted, my grandmother, when she and my mother and stepdad dropped me off, they said, "Don't get involved. That's not what we brought you here for. So do not get involved." And my grandmother made me promise. And I promised her. I said, "Oh, no, I'm not getting involved. I'm not." And I meant what I said to her. And, obviously, fate had something else in store for me. First of all, my grandmother also said, "Join a church as soon as you unpack your bags." And so I met a friend who said, "Come and go with me to my church, my sister's church." And so 2 Sundays or so in, off I went with her to her sister's church. And it was the West Hunter Street Baptist Church, 3 blocks from Spelman's campus. And the minister of the church was Ralph David Abernathy. Well, that didn't mean anything to me. So I did not know who he was. But from day one, he was preaching about the movement. And then I learned that he had been in Montgomery and very close to Dr. King in the Montgomery bus boycott, and that he also was one of the founders of Dr. King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So every Sunday from the pulpit, all I was hearing was everybody has to get involved in this movement. The other thing was that I just took a class from Staunton Lynn, never knew who he was, and got in the class, found out he was a Quaker and very involved in the movement. And it was American history as I had never had it taught before. So I learned about, the slave revolts and Reconstruction, and all. I was in a state of shock because I didn't know about any of this. And so he was connecting the civil rights movement to the abolitionist struggle, to the Reconstruction struggles. And it was sort of like, oh my God, is really? And then, the SNCC people were always on campus. One in particular was Willie Ricks. And all my SNCC friends know who he is. We now know him as Mukasa. And he was like, sister, you better get on board here. And I was like, no, that's not what I came here for. Well, he was on campus practically every day, wearing me and others down. So, it was getting to be very difficult not to be involved. And as you mentioned, I met Vincent and Rose Harding. They were head of Mennonite House. And someone told me, because at Spelman, you didn't get a hot meal on Sundays in the evening. And we were always hungry. Some people had money, to go to restaurants for their evening meal. And I didn't have that. And somebody said, have you heard of Mennonite House? They said they have a big dinner every Sunday and it's free. And I was like, how do you get there? So off I went to the Mennonite House and met Rose and Vincent. And of course, it was love almost immediately. And I started going regularly, and there were always discussions. And it was the first time that I had ever met white young people my age, because there were students from Emory, from Georgia Tech. And here we were all sitting around these tables, eating together and treating each other like human beings. This was a first, other than Staunton, and I later met Howard, and I had some other white teachers, but this was all first, because this had not been the case growing up in the apartheid system. Lest we forget, that's exactly what it was. It was apartheid.
It dawns on me, Zohara, when you're saying this, I'm sorry, when you're saying this, it dawns on me that you actually took your grandmother's advice to heart and did find a church. You found a church and then found Reverend Abernathy, which actually in some ways maybe set you on that course to where you ended up, right?
Well, yes. And then, maybe 3 Sundays in, there was Martin Luther King sitting up in the pulpit. Well, I knew who he was because I knew about the boycott. And of course, he was singing the same song as Abernathy, and saying what marches were going to be happening that he was leading and how we all needed to join. So I was being worn down. I mean, it was like, I felt ashamed, really, not to be joining the SNCC young people, all of whom were my age, had dropped out of college to work full time. And so little by little, and I'm sorry to drag this out, but I started getting involved and trying to keep it a secret. Clearly, first of all, Spelman did not want us involved and told us that if they found out that we were involved, we could lose our scholarships. Well, of course, that meant I would be sent home because nobody could afford to keep me there. So little by little, first I went to the SNCC office, and you had to lie on the sheet that you signed out for because you clearly could not say you were going to SNCC. So I probably said I was going to the library or to visit a friend in a dorm. And anyway, I would go to the SNCC office. Jim Foreman is there sweeping the floor. And I'm like, who is he? And I meet John Lewis, who is he? And all of these people, and they just welcome me. And it was, they were beginning to break down all the promises I had made to my grandmother, but I was still trying to hang on. Now, moving ahead, I got involved with the student organization. Somehow I got through that first year without getting in big trouble, even though I had gone on a few demonstrations. But the second year, I was elected to be in what was it called? The Student Appeal for Human Rights. This was an organization founded by Julian Bond and other students. And I was elected to be a representative to SNCC from that organization. Well, the minute that I let my name be put in and I got elected, I knew everything was going to change. And then I started going to the SNCC meetings, again, lying about where I was going, having people cover for me in the dorm to protect me from the house mother. One of those people protecting me was Alice Walker, who lived right across the hall and was the RA. So, she could cover for me pretty well. But anyway, I learned that there was going to be a Mississippi Freedom Summer Project. And of course, Howard Zinn was an advisor to SNCC. He was very involved. Thornton Lynn was helping to develop the curriculum for the Freedom Schools. I got involved with him as a student working on independent study to work with him on developing the curriculum. Anyway, things had changed drastically. I knew that I had to go to Mississippi. And I also knew that my grandmother would never, ever permit it if she could have her way. And of course, I had been taught all my life about how horrible Mississippi was. It was the worst place in the world. People would run from the plantations in the dead of night, and people would hide them out in Memphis and help them get on a freight train going north. I mean, I knew all these stories. So to tell her I was going to Mississippi to help Black people register to vote, to her, that was like saying, I'm getting ready to commit suicide. So there was no way she was going for it. And so my idea that I had plotted out with the SNCC folk and with Thornton Lynn and others, that I wasn't telling her. I just wasn't going to go home at the end of the spring semester of 1964. But, a number of my friends knew. Somehow it got back to the dean. The dean called my grandmother and told her what I had planned. And so on the day after the last classes, Mrs. Gordon, who was our house mother, who lived in the dorm with us, knocked on my door at 6 a.m. saying, "You have guests." And I'm like, "We don't have guests at 6 a.m. in the morning. What are you talking about, Miss Gordon?" And then my grandmother said, "It's me, and I've come to take you home." I was like, oh my God.
Well, she knew, right? She had been
Well,
told.
the dean had called her and told her.
Right.
The dean of Spelman called her and told her what I was planning.
That's where they kind of took you back to Memphis, and they kind of, as you talk about in the book, they kind of held you hostage for a few days.
Yeah, they did. And
yeah.
I was trying to get word. Well, I'd left a few notes to let Thornton know what had happened. And of course, I was getting in touch by phone, collect calls to SNCC, letting Jim Foreman know what had happened. And of course, Jim Foreman sent me the money for a bus ticket, and my grandmother intercepted it, tore it up, and bragged about it to me. And so then I had to call Jim Foreman back and say, don't put it in my name and don't send it to my house. I gave him a name and a place to send it. So he sent the money order to my girlfriend, who then bought my ticket.
So
and
it's extraordinary
it
how
was
much
a
you, I mean,
great-
it was a huge rupture in your family, it sounds like,
Yeah.
to do it. So what
Oh,
was it? I mean, so SNCC must have been, they talk about in the book how it must have been an overwhelming sort of feeling going on at SNCC that you were being a part of, to go through all that in order to be a part of it. It sounds like whatever was happening at that offices and with those people was just very heady and very important in order for you to just change your path so much, right?
Oh, absolutely. So now remember, it's Benson and Rose, because Benson is very involved in the planning of the 1964 Mississippi Summer Project. Staunton is involved. Howard Zinn is involved. I mean, you know, these are the people who have become my mentors, my friends, and I'm learning all this history, and I'm understanding how the civil rights movement is a continuation of the long struggle that African Americans have been engaged in. As Vincent Harding says in his book, There is a River, that began in Africa when people fought against being enslaved. So this history had become alive to me, and I understood that what we were doing was a continuation of something that had begun in 1619. It was too important not to be a part of it, but it was also very difficult, because to have my grandmother tell me, if you leave, don't ever come back. And for my mother to be standing there and my dad backing her up, that was heartbreaking. And also to leave Spelman. Now, of course, I didn't realize I was leaving forever, at least leaving college, because with Staunton's help, I had already been, without my parents' knowledge, admitted to Antioch. And he got Coretta Scott King to help me get into Antioch, because he told me, you're never going to survive at Spelman. They don't want you here. You need to leave. And then I said, well, leave and go where? You know, and he said Antioch, and I'd never heard of Antioch. So then he, you know, made arrangements for Mrs. King, who had gone to Antioch, to help me. So I had already been admitted to Antioch when I left for Mississippi.
But just
that's where I thought I was going.
to fast forward, you go to Laurel, and in those 2 years in SNCC, it sounds like you eventually get to the Atlanta. It sounds like that's where the ideas around Black Power really started to sort of take form with you and other members of SNCC in the Atlanta project, right? It's sort of things you started sort of moving away from SNCC. Is that fair to say? Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, it wasn't moving away from SNCC. It was a natural development of understanding that African Americans needed to have a sense of the movement being their movement. And it's important because this is a very delicate issue, and it practically tore SNCC apart, because many of us understood that because of internalized racism, the fact that Black people had been indoctrinated, inculcated in the knowledge, in the belief of inferiority. I mean, let's just be out front about it. Many people had that feeling. So I experienced in Laurel that when a Black person came into the office, we called it the COFO office then, if there was a white person there, they assumed that person was in charge. And so I could be there, and it might even have something on the desk that said I was in charge. It didn't matter, because if white people were on the premises, they were in charge, because this is how they had grown up. So of course I had seen this and many times had sort of internal workshops with the volunteers about this, that they needed to work at helping Black people not feel inferior to them, not think that they were the ones in charge, because this was a Black movement and it was so important. So what happened in the Atlanta project of SNCC was that many of us sat around and shared with a tape recorder going what our experiences had been and how it was important for SNCC to be seen as a Black organization, and that racisms could not be solved in the Black community, that it had to be solved in the white community. And so we wanted our white colleagues and comrades to go into the white community to organize, to educate, just as we were doing in the Black community, so that we could bring the two groups together to really create the democratic society that we wanted. But of course, this, the fact that when Stokely said Black Power on that march in Mississippi, the media, took it to be a statement of hate. And then the whole issue of the role of whites in SNCC, this was very, very difficult because many of the white colleagues had also left their families and been kicked out of their homes to become part of this movement. And so there was a lot of hurt that I wish we could have handled it differently. But the whole issue had to do with Black people taking ownership and being seen as self-determining leaders of their own community, and for our white comrades to go into the white community and educate them about the problems of racism and the anti-democratic nature of our society.
That's great. I want to bring Ariel in here in a second. I want to get to the religious aspect, the Nation of Islam, and then moving on. But yeah, Ariel, please jump in with.
I just want to jump in for a minute and bring us up to today, and this question about what is the role of white people, and especially in this moment where white Christian nationalism is soaring in prominence. And how would you see that evolution to today? The role of white people, and specifically white Christian Americans, in educating our own communities?
Well, let me just back up a minute to say that there were a number of white SNCC organizers who did go into the white community to organize, and there were projects, and they found it was very difficult. And in some cases, when the white community learned that they were connected to the civil rights movement, their lives were threatened and they were run out of these towns. So as I look back, and as I'm very active still to this day, I think that there should have been more effort. And of course it was dangerous. Whereas in the Black community, we were welcomed, we were given homes and all of this. This was not the case for our white comrades who went into the white community to organize. So, but nonetheless, we can see today that we still have the same problems. I mean, even though the civil rights movement made a major change, particularly in the South, no question about it, but that deep-seated white supremacy and racism was not, unfortunately, unearthed. And so when you have movements like Trump has led, it's easy to ignite it again, particularly when people feel that they are losing out on the America that they thought they were going to have. And so you need to blame somebody. So then you can blame Black and brown people, you can blame immigrants. And then if you bring in white nationalist Christianity to buttress this white supremacy, you really got problems. And that's exactly what we have now. So this is, and when I look at, I'm in Florida, the red state with DeSantis, who's a very dangerous person, leading the fight against the teaching of true American history, Black history, being anti, anything that tells the truth about this country and the movements that have brought us forward. And people are eating this stuff up, and it's not just in the South. So we do have tremendous problems to deal with.
Thank you. And I want to encourage folks in the chat to please add some questions as well if they have any. Sorry, Errol, did you have any, did that answer your question? I thought it was
That absolutely did. I just seemed so relevant to today. And I also want to hear about faith. And so please, Bill, continue.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Zohara, when I told her that our next, and thank you for the questions are coming. And we hope, by the way, before we get off, before we have Zohara lead us in prayer, before we're done, we're going to have Michael and Aisha hopefully to get on with us and say hello at the end. So please stay tuned for that as well. And we've got a lot of people here, so thank you for being here. But Zohara, we talked a lot about the role of faith. You joined the Nation of Islam for a little while, never really fully, sounds like you were particularly enmeshed in that world as much with Farrakhan. And then looks like somebody's microphone. Okay, and then kind of get into you're sort of a Sufi Islam, but you've always talked about the importance of faith in your own journey on this. And you also talked about that nobody so far in all the publicity you're doing in the book talks about religion and faith. Can you speak to that a little bit and the importance of it?
Certainly. And let me just remind people who don't know that I was raised in a deeply religious home, and my grandmother and grandfather and all of my family were, avid churchgoers. And so religion was a foundational piece for me. Then when I joined the civil rights movement, you will recall that the Jim Lawson, who was there at the founding of SNCC, and then you have, many people who were deeply religious, who were in the civil rights movement, not only Dr. King's movement, but in SNCC itself. And so when I joined the movement, while I was not nearly as religious as I had been growing up, it was important to me that religion was a major component of our movement. And of course, living and working in Mississippi with the people like Mrs. Eberta Spinks and Miss Carrie Clayton and others, these were deeply religious people. And they were putting everything on the line to join this movement, to have us living in their homes. These are homes they had worked for all their lives, and they were putting all of that on the line. And what enabled them to do it was their deep faith in God. And so this, of course, while I might have been, trying to move away from that, this was constantly being reinforced by all these women, Fannie Lou Hamer. I mean, there's so many others. They were all very deeply religious people. And then, of course, when I began learning more about Black nationalism, et cetera, when we were in Atlanta, there was a Nation of Islam mosque, they were called temples then, that was right close by where the Atlanta Project office was. And so these men particularly were always coming by the office, dropping off the newspaper, talking to us about Islam. At that point, I was much more interested in the social programming of the nation, the whole idea that Black people needed a homeland. And in what he was proposing was 5 states where Black people could live in peace and harmony amongst themselves. And while I think in retrospect, he never expected that to happen, they were building institutions right wherever there were these temples. So there were businesses. And remember, growing up in the Jim Crow South, I had always seen Black businesses because of apartheid, we had to have our own everything. So, that included pharmacies, doctors, dentists, little grocery stores, shoe shops, cleaners. So of course, when I saw that the nation was promoting that Black people own their own businesses and have them on a much larger scale, and of course buying farmland and all of that, that's what really attracted me much more so than the religion itself. But of course, once I got involved, then I wanted to know more about, well, wait a minute, so you're Islamic, so, what is it, and I began studying beyond just what the Nation of Islam itself was teaching. And there were many within the nation who were deeply committed to Islam as a religious practice, but that was not what initially attracted me to it. But of course, I was always interested in the spiritual aspects of life. And while in SNCC, I had been introduced to Sufism, but before Sufism even, other forms of mysticism. And so this really attracted me, and it began my digging into aspects of mysticism, both in Christianity and in Islam. And of course, this led me to meet a teacher who had come from Sri Lanka to the United States, named M.R. Bawa Mahayuddin. And of course, prior to meeting him, I had read the collected works of Inayat Khan, Hazrat Inayat Khan. I'd read some other Sufi works, and these appealed deeply to me. And so that began my sort of formal and informal search in the mystical stream. Certainly working for the Quakers, that mystical stream of Christianity that the Quakers represent also was quite influential in my life.
That's interesting. I really, this is so good. And I know we probably go a little bit over time if folks are okay. We've got great numbers of people and people are putting tons of questions in here, but one that it's kind of, I apologize if we can't get all the questions, but the question of gendered violence or gender.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ariel, sorry.
I wonder, first of all, if I can add to this question a little bit, but also I just want to propose here as we're already close to an hour in, and we've got full house and a lot of questions and engagement. So I'm thinking that we likely want to do a follow-up, whether that's next month or a couple months down the road, and have you back, and so that we can really go from your history and what brought you here to your thoughts on today as well. We touched on that, but I think we could go a lot deeper. So I just want to propose that as an idea.
And I want you to know I'm able to go on for some more time, unless you got or not.
We'll go on longer, but I still think we're going to want to do a part 2 at some point, and really dig into, the work you've done with us to end the war in Ukraine and so much more. But on this question of gender, and movement. And I know you get real personal in your book, and I appreciate that, because I'm one who believes that the personal is political. And I think there's so many of us, myself included, who are survivors of sexual assault. I mean, and including within the movement. So I wonder if you could talk about gender within the movement, feminism within the movement, and then also broadly in your life, and what it is, which includes to be a single mother, a working single mother in the movement, which is also something I've that's personal to my heart, and just so many of us. But if you could speak a bit about women.
Certainly. The SNCC was, from what I know of it, the most egalitarian gender-wise of the civil rights movements. And everybody's got to remember, we're talking the 1950s and 60s. And this is a patriarchal society. It's a sexist society. It always has been. And so there's no way, unless you are working at digging out the roots of patriarchy and in some cases misogyny, hatred of women, it's not going to happen. So certainly, while SNCC was a lot more egalitarian than others, sexism absolutely was within the organization. Sometimes my colleagues remind me that women at SNCC were heads of offices, we were project directors, etc. That's true. But nonetheless, there was still sexism. I certainly know that I felt in Laurel as a project director that I was the last one to get a number of things, like a brand new car. When the cars were being given out, they were given to the men first, even though for a time after the summer project, there were just 3 women in Laurel, and we had these old clunkers, and trying to outrun the Klan and them was not something you could really do. So I had to fight to get a car, a fast new car. Then there was, I was sexually assaulted while I was in SNCC, and this happened to others, and I know others to whom it happened, and it certainly happened to me by someone whom I respected, and was just stunned that he would do this to me, because here I am, a comrade, as we used to say, putting my life on the line, just as he was, that he would dare to sexually assault me. But this, this is the complexity of life in these societies. And as you all know, I spent 2 years living in the Middle East doing my dissertation research on the impact of Sharia law on women in Jordan. That's the title of the dissertation. And of course, I traveled back and forth to Syria and Egypt and Palestine and Israel, interviewing women about this issue. And working to help women who were already trying to change the laws and the interpretations of the Hadith that undergird these very sexist, misogynist laws that were on the books in all of these societies. And certainly I witnessed the terrible, terrible treatment of women in many of these societies. And so this is, something that is very deep in my own heart to work on, issues about women and law and women and culture and women and religion, because often the religions sanctify the mistreatment of women. And this is a huge problem in all of the Abrahamic faiths. It's not just Islam. It's in Judaism and it is in Christianity. And I have been working on that for many years now with daughters of Abraham, as we often call ourselves, trying to change the way women are treated. That has been buttressed by our religious traditions.
You have so many great
Patriarchy is
comments
deep.
here. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's just-
patriarchy is deep, and thank you for that multiple level work within the
And-
movement and to transform the movement, and within to honor faith and yet transform the problematic elements. Bill, please go ahead.
No, but thank you. We're going to probably go 15 or 20 minutes over to 5:15 or so. So thank you for your patience. So many great quotes. Somebody just, I think it was, I can't remember who, but I think it was somebody just said, yes, we should do a series just on this topic of gender. And perhaps that is a good example. I mean, there's a lot of energy around that. I apologize that I can't get to all these. Is there, have you've been paying more attention to the questions perhaps? Can you have anything in there, Ariel, you'd like to highlight?
Yeah. Hold
There's
on
a
one.
lot of questions in here on big questions on reparations. Your work with AFC, with the Quakers, and I think Ethan highlighted a question there that it was about your work on police brutality and surveillance state, red squads way back in the 1970s. I wasn't aware of that. That's not really in the book too much. Somebody asked about that in the, I think it was Linda Lotz asking about that. Can you talk about that a little?
And Linda, hi, Linda. Thank you for that. Linda and I worked in the AFSC together. Yes, when I was hired to work at the AFSC, it was as the associate director of the program on government surveillance and citizens' rights. What a long name. But this was a national project to investigate the role of red squads, which are police, local police intelligence units that worked closely with the FBI and others, spying on civil rights, human rights, peace organizations, infiltrating those organizations, and often being agents provocateurs to get people to do things that they knew would break the law so that they could be arrested. Just to tell you something that, really was so shocking. I went to, as a part of my work, I traveled all over the country interviewing people who had been in the movements. And that included not only, the civil rights movement, but the American Indian movement, the Brown Berets, as the Mexican American movement was called, the Black Panthers, etc. And so I went to Chicago, and at that point, the place where, and the name just ran out of my head that quickly, Hampton, somebody help me, was killed by the police. He was a Black Panther leader. They made a movie about it.
Fred
Fred
Hampton.
Hampton. Thank you. Somebody put it in the chat. Thank you for helping me. So of course I interviewed Fred Hampton's girlfriend, who was inside the apartment when the FBI and the Red Squad did the shootout. It wasn't a shootout, it was a shoot in that killed him and another Panther member. You may know, any of you who saw the film, that she escaped without being killed. And so they took me to the apartment to show me the bullet holes, that there was none from coming out from the apartment. They were all going in. Certainly interviewing a lot of people out on the West Coast about Panthers who were killed, who were set up. This was a mind-blowing assignment. And one of the things we did was to prepare reports that we sent to the Congress about the illegal activities. Shockingly, the Quaker meeting houses were infiltrated. And in one case, a FBI agent became the head of the meeting. So, you know, there was no respect for anything because the Quakers were seen as, you know, in the forefront of the peace movement. So they too had to be spied upon, etc. So this was my first job with the American Friends Service Committee. And of course, we also started looking at police violence. But the main focus was on these intelligence units and how they had been used to destroy our social change movements of that era.
Great. We have a question here that Ethan brought up about talking about intergenerational issues, and Ethan mentions your role as a mentor with today's frontline organizers, dream defenders, et cetera. Do you want to talk about like what you're seeing
Yeah,
among them?
and I want to add to that just a little bit because it relates to mentorship. What keeps you going? You've been in this for a long time, like you said. White Christian nationalism and white supremacy is as strong and flourishing as ever. So what keeps you going, and how intergenerational work may play into that?
Well, certainly, I'm glad you connected the two. Michael Simmons, who I think is still on the call, the biography is about him and me. He was asked this question at a session in, I believe it was in DC, and he said, well, you know, what you gonna do? I mean, you see what's going on. How can you not do whatever it is you can do? Now maybe, and I feel the same way. I mean, I would like to turn away, but I can't. I mean, you know, the situation is such that you care about the young people, you care about the old people, you care about everybody. And to be able to change the bad things, to put it just briefly, that are happening in our society, it seems to me like a duty to do whatever you can. And certainly working with young people in the Dream Defenders and the Black Lives Matter movement, and initially in the Occupy movement, where, you know, I was sitting out there with the Occupy people in Oakland, in New York, and even here in Gainesville, Florida, where I live. And I was moved and impressed with just being with them. And certainly many of the people who founded the Dream Defenders had been students of mine here at the University of Florida. And when Trayvon Martin was killed, these people who had been sitting in my classes, I didn't even know if they were really being moved by all the stuff we were talking about and all the films, you know, and stuff. And then when Trayvon was killed, these people just jumped up. They were like, we're going to do something about this. So I was like, oh my goodness, yes, yes. And, you know, the Dream Defenders was born from that. So that certainly, being with them does give me hope, and it also enlivens my spirit to know that there is another generation and another generation after that coming on, who are going to fight for what is right, what is good, and still try to make this society the society it has never been, to live up to its founding documents.
So we have brought Michael Simmons on since you mentioned him, and since so much of the book is about him. So if we could just say a brief hello to you, Michael. And
Is Michael, is he on here?
yes, and Bill, maybe if you have a question for Michael as well.
Well, Michael, what was, I mean, it was,
Can you spotlight him or do
yeah, why would
something?
have you spotlight him? Can you?
Oh, he is on video for other folks. He is.
Okay, and I don't think Aisha is still here, but she might not be because I looked for her. But yeah, Michael, it's nice to meet you this way. What was it? The process of putting this book together and reading it back, is it what is that like looking back at 70 or 60 years of activism?
Oh, well, it's been amazing. I mean, it when you look back on it, it feels like yesterday in many ways. But like I'm just so in a very humble way proud of the things I've been able to do, people I've met, and a few of the changes that I helped to make. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like, given the fact that you and Zohara split up relatively early after Aisha, not, when Aisha was pretty young, you talk about how movements have difficulty staying together, and yet you and Zohara have been, sort of compatriots in many other ways. How was that? I mean, given all the struggles and movements, how did you do that in your personal relationship? And maybe Zohara should say, speak to that.
Well, let me just say very quick. I mean that because we always respected each other. One, our relationship was one of love and friendship, and our goals in a broad sense. While we may have got different strategies, even got different philosophies along the way, we both understood that our work was rooted in the love of the people with whom we were working. Yes. Which goes beyond African Americans, I might add. Yeah.
And it's pretty clear in the book toward the end, and maybe Zohara, you can comment on this. Dan Berger, who apparently is going to be doing an event on February 24th, that I think we put in the you put in the chat there.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So, but Dan mentioned, it really sounds like at a certain point with your daughter and Zohara, clearly the three of you really focused on feminism, the role of women. And I know you've been very outspoken. Zohara is talking. Can you talk a little about that, Zohara, about how Michael has sort of supported you in those conversations?
Oh, absolutely. Michael has been what I would call a feminist pretty much ever since I've known him. And therefore, his work within our organizations, he has always supported women. And, Michael also worked for the American Friends Service Committee. So we were working there together in the Third World Coalition within the AFSC. Michael was a supporter of the women's movement. I mean, the women's program within AFSC. So, this has been a collaboration for 60 years on many issues that we both feel so strongly about.
But so let me just say on that issue though of sexism, I mean, philosophically, clearly, what Zohara says is true, but that doesn't mean that like I haven't come a long ways since the 60s. I mean, I can remember one particular time when even though I disagreed with it, I acquiesced to some men and women that Zohara and I were around. And when the men got to talking politics, the women were kind of ushered out of the room. And while I thought, particularly with Zohara, that it was absurd, I didn't take a stand against it. And so that's just but one thing that sticks out of my mind. But the point I want to make though is that one, the struggle against sexism has to be men talking to men, and not men being quote allies of women, as if that in of itself is cool because you know which side to vote on. But you have to be willing to challenge sexism amongst your peers, and in the same way that white people had to be willing to challenge racism with white people, not just to be a friend of the colored people, as I say sarcastically, but to actually engage white people on the issue of their racism. Yeah.
And Michael, where are you now? Are you in the States, or I know you lived in Hungary for a while. Where are you living?
Right. No, as of September of last year, I'm a reborn Philadelphian. So I'm back to Philly. Yeah.
Oh, great. So are you still working in movement circles, or what are you working with any particular organization?
Well, the wife and I work with a refugee group in Hungary still, but that's a long story. But in terms of here in the US, I haven't been doing much lately, but as soon as this book reality will slows down, I'm on the go. I mean, I have some projects that, are waiting.
And there's a lot of promotion going on with the book still, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And, I do want to say, because it's so easy to forget in terms of zohara myself, but it's the book was conceived of by Dan Berger, that he had to convince us, I know me, to even do it and take the time to engage. And I think that he did just a masterful job at weaving the complexity of our lives into one narrative. And I just want to underscore my love and respect for Dan and what he was able to accomplish.
Yeah, Zohara, you met Dan was one of your early students, right? Is that the case in Florida?
Yes, and let me just say that when Dan mentioned 7 years ago now that he wanted to write a book about Mike and me and Aisha, at that point he wanted to weave the three of our lives together, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? Nobody's gonna be interested in us. Nobody's." I mean, I couldn't even imagine it, and I couldn't imagine. And I said to him, "You're never going to get a publisher. Why would they publish it?" So I'm happy to have been proven wrong. But yes, I met Dan in 2000. It was his freshman year and my freshman year as a professor here at UF. And he reminded me, because I thought it was in a class I was teaching. That came later. He first met me when I was invited to a history class that he was taking to give a lecture on the civil rights movement. And he talks about how listening to me talking about Mississippi, the Atlanta Project, he said he was and he was already, an activist in high school, that he said, "Oh my God, it's a lot of stuff I don't know about the movement." So he did then take a class with me, which was the second semester that I was here at UF. And, we've been friends ever since that time.
You not only got a publisher, you got a major commercial publisher, Basic Books. It's everywhere. You can find it everywhere. I think Ariel says we're going to try to be getting it on our store as well, but you can find it, I'm sure, any major bookseller, and please support it.
Yes.
It's really,
Yes.
really a great book. It's and look, we're going to end with a prayer in a moment here from you, Zohara, but I want to say a couple things. We have not even scratched the surface of so many questions and things people are asking. So we will hope to do a follow-up to this. So stay tuned. We will do something soon, hopefully. We'll reconnect after this and get back to you all on that. Thank you all for your questions and your passion. It's so evident here that this is something that people really love to talk about: issues of gender, issues of faith, issues of the movement and continuing, et cetera, generationally. And I want after Zohara. Sorry,
yes, just a quick question about the book and getting it. It is everywhere, including Amazon. So I wonder of you, Zohara and Michael, if you have a preference, an independent bookseller or such that
Oh, absolutely.
would recommend for people to buy it through.
Oh, they don't have a particular venue, but not Amazon. I mean,
All right.
Yeah, I'm clear on that. I mean, independent bookstores.
And
support independent bookstores wherever you are. Yes.
Actually go to your local bookstore. If they are not already getting it, ask them to get it. And that would probably be the best way.
And let me ask people to get it in your public libraries.
Yeah.
So go to your librarian and have your librarians to order it so that it's in the bookstore, in the library, so that people who maybe can't afford, because it's a hardback at this point, they would be able to borrow it. And lastly, please save the chat. And if you send me the chat, I will be happy to try and sketch out some answers to questions, and we can decide how you might want to share those answers, since we had such good questions that could not be spoken to.
I can attest to the fact that Zohara doesn't sleep, because I get emails from her at 3 a.m. or text. Did you see this, Bill? And I was like, do you ever sleep, lady? Come on. So anyway, which we love her for. So she will get to this. So because her energy is extraordinary, seriously. And Ethan mentions Anthony Grimes' review of the book will be coming out on Waging Nonviolence. And we'll promote that on on the Waging Nonviolence page, as well as Fellowship Magazine. And I also want to say, this is something after we're done, after Zohara's, we do the prayer. We had so many people stick around. It's extraordinary number of people stick. If people want to stay around and say hello, I'm going to stay on, and Zohara can say hello quickly, or say so we're going to keep the microphones open, try not to deluge her with your thanks and love, but we'll stay on here as long as it takes if people want to kind of gather and do a little fellowship over Zoom at the end of this. And with that, if Ariel or
turn on your cameras. Sorry, Bill, what'd you say to me?
I was going to say, I'm going to have Zohara give a little prayer to finish it up.
Yep.
And other than
And I'm
that,
gonna ask them to turn on their cameras and unspotlight us so that we can all be on screen together.
Thank you. And you know, we know that some of our colleagues from AFSC, from SNCC, from the Unitarians and all of here, so we just give you greetings and thank you so much for coming to this event. And thank you, FOR, for hosting it. Thank you.
you're welcome, please. And if you'd like to lead us out with the prayer, that'll be wonderful.
Okay, and as a Muslim, I will start out with what all Muslims start out with, a saying, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which means in the name of God, the most merciful and the most beneficent. Dearest Mother, Father God, creator of all the universes and all within it, in this time of war, poverty, hunger, and disease, not created by you, but by those among us who have taken way more than their share of what has been provided, and have abrogated to themselves dominion over our earth. Remind them and us that only love, peace, compassion, justice, and wisdom are enduring. These are your divine qualities. May we unite to build the beloved community. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us. Again, please say hello. If anybody else said it, please stick around and say hello if you like. Sorry.
That was such a beautiful prayer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Zara.
Thank you, Zohara.
It was gorgeous. Thank you.
There are a lot of people here. I think we're children of SNCC members that were saying hello in the chat. If you want to say hello.
There's Dottie Zellner. Hi, Dottie.
Hi, Zohara. Really a great lecture. Really great. It's so nice to see you, Mike. I haven't seen you.
I know.
And I totally endorse a lot of what you said. I had to leave for a phone call in the middle, so I didn't hear everything. But good work, great work.
Well, thank goodness this was recorded. So one of the good things about Zoom is that, first of all, we can all come together across the country without having to burn up any of the fuel flying wherever we're flying to, but also that it's a record we can share with everybody. I also saw my friend Tom Bullock, who is here from Gainesville, a member of the Unitarian Church that I'm a member of. You know, you can only see a few people on your screen, and I happen to be on an iPad, so I can not even see everybody. I know the Malinowskis were on. Michael, did you see Jack and his wife?
Yeah.
Okay. And anybody else, please speak out because I can't see, but what is it? 9 people per screen.
Well, it's just, it's Maxine Downs calling from Los Angeles, California. And Zohara, it was the storytelling, the history. It was just so wonderful. I've heard a lot of the stories. We were in Gainesville together, and yet at the same time, you just kind of unraveled parts of these stories that I've never heard. So you're such a gift, and you're a griot is what you are. And I just, I'm so grateful that you invited me and that I was able to make it. So Michael, I've heard a lot about you through the years. We've never actually met. But I just want to say from my heart, I just want to say thank you to you both. You guys just really played such a pivotal role in waking us all up in terms of the country, in terms of, you know, what's possible in terms of not only Black liberation, but from the standpoint of American liberation. And I just thank you for that, just from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah. Thank you.
My girlfriend. Oh,
Just
my.
want to mention that there is a book event with Dan and myself in Los Angeles in March. I just put it on the chat, the information, so people can check that.
Wonderful.
Is there a mailing list, or do you have a mailing list, or how do we? I
Yeah,
saw the link tree.
Right.
Hi. I saw the link tree. I wondered if, like, how do we keep up? Are those events live, or will there be more Zoom events? And also, I'm really interested in how do we engage you? Like, I have a women's group. I'd love for some folks, more folks to hear from you all.
Bonnie, we can put you on our list, but Michael, do you have the lists for the book or for any mailing list that Dan might have?
No, I don't. But if you send it to Dan or Zohara, yeah, then like I will get it. Yeah.
Hey, Bonnie.
Okay, so I could drop in the chat here, huh? My email address.
You can do. I put my email
Yeah.
in the chat. You can feel free to email me, and we can put you on our list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I'll put me on FR's list anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, please.
Bonnie,
Thank you.
Please send it.
And you know,
Yeah.
Dan has done a Google Docs. I mean, I'm trying to
Yeah.
learn how to use these Google Docs, but you know, sometimes it's hard for us old people to learn all the new tricks. But there is a Google Doc that has everything on it. So if we can get Dan to send that to anybody who wants it. So please give Bill your email and he will give it to me and I will give it to Dan. I know it sounds complicated, but we will get you the listing of the appearances because Mike's going to be out on the West Coast. You guys are doing Seattle and Portland and LA and San Francisco. I'm scared, so I'm still in the house, but they're out there doing it.
I have to get off, but I just wanted to say it was really great, really great.
Good seeing you, Dottie. Thanks for coming.
Great, Dottie. Yes. And
Yeah, I would like to say hello.
Oh, there's Naila, who is a member of the Bawa Mahayadeen Fellowship.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
And I would like to say, without being too specific, that Zohara continues her work on behalf of humanity in some very wonderful ways, even just from Facebook. You know, she is reaching out with lots of important information. Her heart is everywhere. Her voice is everywhere.
Thank you, Naila. Salam
Thank you.
alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I got a question for Zohara. I'm phoning in from Oberlin, Ohio, and I wondered whether you were among the 100 or so friends and relatives of Stoughton and Alice Lind who gathered in November at Youngstown. They said they wanted their folks to get together before there was a memorial service. And Alice Walker was there. And did you say that you were there?
You're talking about his birthday party that we had? Yes, I was there. Yes, yes. So
And then,
you were there also. Yes, dear Staunton. And I also attended his memorial service after his passing a few months back, but nice to meet you.
Alice Lind continues to want to be in touch with people, and we can arrange personal visits with her as well. She was such a strong part of that team, and the two of them were the heart and soul of the draft resistance movement of Chicago. Whole generation of people who were sustained and supported and inspired by the two of them. She was one of the, Alice Lind is one of 4 Quaker Alices that we named our daughter for.
Oh, I love Alice. Oh my goodness. They took me in, they met me at the Greyhound bus station in 1964. My eyes were bloodshot from crying all the way from Memphis. And Staunton and Alice and the 2 children met me and they said, don't cry, and took me home. They said, we're your family now. So I have so much love for them.
Great. Michael, nice being with you. I know folks are,
Thank you.
people don't want to give up. Camille Cower saying hello. She's been very
Hey,
active.
Camille.
Hey,
Hi, everyone. So
Hello.
glad to be here, representing
Hi,
for my dad, I
Camille.
guess.
Yeah.
thank you for coming and
Oh, it's
staying.
my pleasure. I'm so glad I found out about it in time to make it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
great. Thank you.
And, tell your father I'm coming his way, but I'll call him. Yeah.
I definitely will.
Yeah. Okay.
Sherry Martin's in the house. Good to see Sherry from San Francisco, the Bay Area, I think, right?
Oh, Sherry, I did see Sherry, and Sherry is with the National Council of Elders and the King and Breaking Silence Coalition. Thank you, Sherry, for being here.
Wonderful
she
talk,
did-
Zohara. Thank you.
I don't know, Zahara, people don't want to leave. I will say one thing about Zahara. I've known her for a few years now, but because she is so in lockdown over the pandemic, I think she might be a hologram, because I don't think she's been in the presence of another human being for 3 years. She's
Not quite, but almost.
so we were not sure. We joke about that. Say, wait, what if you're not real? What if you're just like a projection on the other end of a screen? So good to be with all of you. Thank you for sticking around. Anybody?
So
have-
powerful to be here today.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I
Yeah,
don't want to
thanks to everybody who pulled this together. This was a wonderful event.
Oh, glad you could make it now.
So Hori, your lecture has been a really good gift to me, having gone with them as a student movement to Montgomery to walk from Selma to Montgomery, and this really brought back a lot of real connections. A
Thanks,
lot of
Larry.
shame, not been more resolved.
Wow. Is that Larry Coleman?
Yeah, Larry.
Yes,
Where are you
Yeah.
where are you calling in from?
I'm in Virginia now. Grew up in Nebraska. That's where we traveled from to go to Montgomery.
Wow, amazing.
You were involved with SNCC at the time, Larry, or
Pardon?
you were involved with SNCC at the time?
Well, I certainly connected with SNCC. I'm trying to remember whether I actually had a membership. We tried to start a Friends of SNCC on campus and had a few people gathered before I went on to seminary.
Oh,
Wow, wonderful to meet you. I didn't make that amazing trek. Know many people who did, but that was a watershed moment in the
Amen.
history of the movement. It was such an important thing you all did.
okay. Well, we're getting down. I guess I'll tell you, folks, we had well over 100 people, and Ethan can attest to this because you're probably looking at. We usually numbers go down throughout an hour, but they were pretty darn strong up for over an hour, up around 100. So that's a pretty amazing. I think it just speaks to people's enjoyment of it, and also how important the conversations. Ethan, you have anything you want to say? Ethan's obviously been a long time FOR employee.
No, just what you said, Bill. I mean, it's been great to have such a, as you named right at the start, Zohara, just how many of the different connections and networks and movements and relationships that you and Michael carried, who were present today, and who've joined from all over. So really, really powerful. So David.
There's a Larry Spears was in Laurel, Mississippi with us. He came in '64. He was in Hattiesburg, and then he came to Laurel, and then he came back the next summer to help us out. So happy to see you, Larry Spears.
Oh, hey, Larry. Yeah, he just got Lawrence. I think you've been in on and off. Hey, Larry, how are you?
Did you share driving that car that you talked about in the one that
No,
where you
Larry
across
was
the
not
state?
one of those two people in the car that you mean the time that we had Jim Foreman in the back seat and got run off the road? Is that the
No, I
story?
was thinking about the car that you went across the state to get.
No, but Larry was not. This was after the '64 summer project, but Larry played a big role in helping us build the movement there in Laurel that we built, and has a wonderful archive in the what's it called, the University of Southern Mississippi. They have a wonderful civil rights archive, and unlike myself, Larry kept his materials pristine and was able to send boxes down there to them. I lost all my stuff in the travels from Mississippi, so I was happy to see Larry's because he let me go through his box before he sent it on to Mississippi so that I could copy some of the materials myself. So wonderful to have you with us, Larry.
Thank
And you met Mike too at AFSC.
Friends, I want to go out on a limb and ask whether my old buddy from Chicago AFSC days, Bob Levering, would want to say anything about the movie that he's producing.
Oh.
Please.
Well,
Bob, you there?
We
He's
see you on the line.
not on camera, but maybe.
I don't know if you're able to speak.
Do you know anything about this movie, Larry? You want to talk? Do you want to, in case he doesn't jump on?
David, it was David that asked.
yeah,
Oh, I thought it was David. I'm sorry, David. I apologize.
sure. It's about the Vietnam movement, anti-war movement, and the role of draft resistors and a number of things all coming together. But Bob is the executive producer, and I'm glad that he's stuck with us this long. So, just Google Robert Levering movie and you'll see it.
Is it out or coming out?
It's in process right now.
Okay, thank you.
Great, great. Well, lovely, wonderful. We're at an hour and 40 minutes, so I don't want to keep people too much longer. If anybody has anything else they want to share, I don't want to, so I want to make sure, Zohara gets dinner too, you know what I mean? It's
Well, I just want to say to David, Michael Simmons was a draft resistor and did 2.5 years in prison in Lewisburg. I see that his camera's off, but I don't know if Levering is finished with his interviewing and just doing editing. But if he still is interested in talking to people, he might want to talk to Mike because he was there with a lot of Quaker conscientious objectors, one of whom is a dear friend of ours in the Bauer Fellowship, Richard Boardman. But there were a number of Quaker men in the prison at the same time Michael Simmons was, for refusing to go to Vietnam.
Boardman and I shared an office. I was supposedly his supervisor, but really he was teaching me.
right.
Rick was one who said, I'm not going to prison, I'm going through prison.
That's great. Well, wonderful to be with all of you. Anybody, I don't want to jump, but if we should probably bow off here. Good being with any last words. Otherwise, we're going to get this up live. So we're going to get this up, a recording of this up hopefully in the next couple days. So look at FOR USA and also our Facebook page and our YouTube page, forusa.org. But thank you again for this, and we hope to do another one soon where we can go a little even deeper with some of these issues that we just touched upon here.
Thank you so much, Ethan and Ariel and Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. God bless you.
Zohara, what a pleasure, what an honor. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Really great to be with all of you. Thank you for this time.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.